morning, BlizzCon.
Good morning. How is everybody today?
It's Saturday morning on the main stage of BlizzCon. That means it's time for the live raid. I'm Ian Hasekostas, lead game designer in World of Warcraft.
And I am Josh Allen, also known as Community Manager Lore.
So I hate to disappoint you guys. I know some of you were really hoping to see some more Siege of Orgrimmar today. But we're going to try to change it up a little bit. Going a little bit of a different direction this time. Unlike our previous live raids, we actually have some new unreleased raid content for you guys. We're going to be racing through Heroic Highmaul, the first raid zone of Warlords of Draenor, opening up on December 2nd on normal and heroic difficulty. This is the seat of imperial power of the Ogre Empire in Draenor. And yeah, it should be a special treat. We're doing heroic, not mythic, because that would just be a bloodbath. These guilds have only had a chance to practice the content the same as any other players in our beta test. During the public periods for each of these raid zones, they were able to just go in and get some practice. But you're seeing stuff that's still relatively unrehearsed comparatively. This isn't something they've been farming for months and months. So without further ado, let's introduce the guilds.
Absolutely. So we, of course, to show off this awesome new content, we wanted to bring some awesome guilds up here on stage, as well as backstage, helping them out. But up here on stage, we have returning champions of last year's live raid. They came in first, world first for Siege of Orgrimmar, actually, and the top Horde guild. We have Method. And our runners-up from last year, also a spectacular guild, #1 alliance guild in the world, we have Midwinter.
All right, so for a quick look at the individual players, on Method's side, we've got Blatty on Mage, Trekkie, of course, tanking on his Paladin, and Roger Brown on Hunter.
And over here, representing the Alliance for Midwinter, we have Kawa playing the Assassination Rogue, we have Sloot playing his Protection Paladin, and we have Godlim on the Windwalker Monk.
All right, enough standing around, enough talking. Let's start this. Everybody join me in a countdown from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Off we go.
All right, so the way this whole thing starts off, what we're seeing now is players begin beneath the Ogre Arena. Players will have quested through Nagrand. On their way up here, they will have fought their way through smaller kind of rings of trials in the course of Nagrand. For those of you who watched the Lords of War animatics, you may remember the huge Ogre Arena where Kargath Bladefist fought, where he was put to the test, where he eventually earned his freedom. This is that location, ultimately, under the watchful eye of the Ogres. Kargath has now returned as an equal, a sort of a partner. He has the upper hand in many ways as part of the Iron Horde. And so he is watching and eager to join in the fight. So unlike previous years, we haven't actually disabled all the trash in the zone, so you're going to be seeing a pretty organic run-through of what it will actually look like on the live servers.
It should be pretty interesting to see just how quickly these guilds can get to the bosses, if nothing else. Definitely going to be a very interesting approach. Of course, as we mentioned, this is on heroic mode. These guys have been raiding, used to be called heroic, now it's called mythic for years at this point. But this is the heroic mode, the normal mode of Mists of Pandaria. So should be interesting at the very least. Get them a chance to really sort of flex their muscles and show what they're capable of.
So yeah, so the first thing that they have to fight is there's a pit champion named Vulgor. He's a Sabron. Sabron are this vicious cat-like race that's native to Draenor. And he comes out with a couple of assistants, a couple of powers. Turns out he's not going to be too stern a test, but just kind of whetting everybody's appetite for the main course to follow.
And looks like here we go. Gate is now opening, walking out into the arena. Look at those guys. They are very sure of themselves walking out there. I don't think they should be quite so confident with that little swagger walking out into this room, as we are now watching up here on the big screen Method starting to just look at those Chaos Bolts coming out too. That's fantastic. Just kicking the crap out of these guys. Already got 2 of them down, and Vulgar looks like he will be falling here very shortly.
Yes, as we look around the arena as a whole, you may notice some fairly distinctive features on the ground. There are a few, cages, a few grates in the ground, these little skulls. As we'll see in a moment with the Kargath encounter, the environment actually plays a really big part in the encounter itself. So something that I think we're going to see a lot more of in Warlords in general. We were really happy with how things like Siegecraft or Blackfuse turned out, and are looking to incorporate the walls, the floor, everything we can into the fights wherever possible. So yeah, as Volgor gets more injured, he calls out Bladespire sorcerers to his aid, but that's really not going to do him much good for much longer.
Yeah, Volgor is definitely bitten off a little bit more than he can chew in this particular situation. Both guilds have him pretty low at this point. Looking at about 20 to 30% on each side, actually a little bit lower even. Now sitting down around 15% on Midwinter's side, looking like Method has him right around the same area. So we should be seeing him fall here very, very shortly.
Yeah, this is pretty much the first pure DPS check between the two guilds. We'll see who actually gets to engage Kargath first.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll give us some hints as to who's pulling ahead.
And actually looks like Midwinter might have gotten him down already.
Well, shades of 2013 with Midwinter eked ahead a little bit on Shaw of Pride.
Yep.
Then of course we all remember what happened after that.
Definitely.
Okay, so
interesting experience.
after Volgor's defeat, Kargath, he's just irate at this. He's like, let me show you how a real warrior fights. Let me prove myself to you, and you're nothing. If anyone who's played through the Tanan Jungle experience, the introduction to Warlords of Draenor, you may remember a moment where you are trapped in Kargath's arena, and he says that you need to prove yourself. You need to kill 100 in order to escape. When you've defeated 99, he comes down and says, I'm going to be the 100th. You need to fight me. At this point, of course, your wonderful ally Khadgar blows a hole in the wall, and you all escape. But he hasn't forgotten that debt, and he's looking to get that 100th kill. And here we go.
And so Midwinter is now starting on him. Midwinter has him at 90% already, so doing a pretty good job so far, pumping the damage into Kargath here. Looks like Method is just about to start. Yeah, Method has just started their pull as well. So Midwinter got themselves about a 17-18% advantage so far, but we'll see if they can keep that up.
So yeah, so Kargath, he has a couple of abilities that are reminiscent of the Shattered Halls dungeon encounter from way back, where he has a blade dance where he dashes around suddenly causing damage to members in the raid. But really, one of the signature things in the fight are the environmental elements. You'll see these big skull pillars that rise up out of the ground that are, denying play space. Also, periodically, those grates in the ground are going to open to reveal tigers that will pretty much kill you instantly if you fall in or get too close to them.
Don't fall in the tiger pits, basically.
Exactly. A little bit of a gladiator nod there. We're all kind of fans of that. That scene.
Absolutely.
One of the things that comes to mind when you think of a gladiatorial arena.
It's always good to bring in new things to not stand in. Don't stand in the fire, don't stand in the tigers.
Now, of course, the other element here, you are fighting in front of maybe not the most friendly audience. The crowd is full of orcs in the Iron Horde and ogres of Heimal. And so not necessarily your biggest fans. And so various unruly spectators are going to start throwing things into the arena. They throw, bombs, various debris. They're just trying to, cause damage and basically cheat. Periodically, Kargath will grab people with his chain, whirl them around, and throw them up into the stands.
Yeah.
And so
it looks like someone from Midwinter's side just got tossed up in there just a second ago. Midwinter now has Kargath at 39%. Method actually catching up. They're now at 47%, so they're closing that gap slowly but steadily. It's just a question of if they're going to be able to close it before Kargath is actually completely finished off. He's now at 32% for Midwinter, still at 44% for Method. So looks like Midwinter definitely is got themselves a bit of an advantage at the moment.
yeah, so and one thing that these guilds are doing, because of course this is a race, normally when people get flung up into the stands, you would take that opportunity to clear out the hostile spectators, reduce some of your raid damage. But of course, that's also hurting your DPS on the boss. So in this case, I think both guilds are having people who get flung up there just almost immediately jump back down, get right back on the boss. It's taxing the healers more, it's creating more environmental damage, but it's going to get you a kill faster if you can brute force it and handle it.
Yeah, definitely. We've actually seen a few people on Midwinter's side dipping kind of low, but it looks like they've just about got him. Kargath is at 6%, 5% now for Midwinter, 4%. A bunch of people dipping low, though, 3% now, 2%. We may have a kill here, 1%, and there it is. Down goes Kargath. And that's 100.
Okay, so now something interesting is happening here. The defeat of Kargath sets the stage for some further events in Heimdall. People who've been questing will have run into a certain ogre by the name of Cho'Gall, one of Gul'dan's powerful lieutenants in the Shadow Council, who's been kind of working in the shadows. And he takes this opportunity, amidst the chaos of the arena battle, amidst Kargath having just been defeated, to make a grand entrance. And he is no friend of these ogres, and actually the Emperor of Heimdall has some very powerful artifacts that Cho'Gall very much would like to have. As we see Method get the kill as well now. And so Cho'Gall comes in, calls down shadowy powers, and actually he has allies, these pale orcs, these cave-dwelling, creepy orcs, clamber over the walls, jump into the arena, and begin to wreak havoc throughout Heimdall. And so that sets the stage for what awaits players as you venture forth into the city beyond the gates.
Yeah, very much a sort of, you've had your victory in the arena, that's cool, now all hell has broken loose, and you've got to almost fight your way back out of it, but also stop this new threat that has now surfaced itself from what Cho'Gall is doing.
So yeah, when we switch to one of the other POVs, you'll see that the guilds have actually obviously skipped this cinematic. You don't have to sit through and watch it every time. It's not the Throne of Thunder Bridge. And so they're already making their way down the main concourse in the center of Heimdall. Now, this area actually has 3 other bosses that we're not going to see today. Off to the left, you would have the stone giant Tectus. Off to the right, you'd have the ogre, the butcher, and then all the way down by the beach near the docks, there's the fungal giant Brackenspore that emerges from the waters. Those are all optional bosses. You don't actually need to defeat them in order to progress through the instance. And in the interest of a race, we're just saying that the first one to kill Imperator Margok at the end of the zone is our winner.
Yep. Always awesome to have those little optional side bosses that you can do in a raid. Lets you sort of pick your way, pick and choose which boss you're going to go to next after you get through Kargath. These guys, obviously, they want to be the one to win, so they're just going straight for the next boss.
Exactly. So as they clear through, the trash in the lower area of Heimdall, after the events that you just saw, consists of both ogres, melee caster ogres, but also the pale orcs that are actually just sort of fighting each other. But then, of course, when you enter the fray, they hate you more than they hate each other. Kind of how it goes.
Yeah. The enemy of my enemy is also my enemy, but maybe a little bit less of my enemy than my other enemy. I think that's how the saying goes. Something like that.
Pretty much, yeah. That's how I remember it. So we see in the background on Midwinter's screen, there's that portal in the distance. The way it works, Heimdall is divided into 2 tiers. There's the lower city, which is just this sprawling area with slums, with a marketplace, a port, and of course the arena that we just saw. And then the Emperor's Citadel is atop the highest heights of the hill, looking down on the rest of the city. There's no direct access up there, but once you've cleared your way to the back end of the city, you can take a portal to access the upper reaches. So we're just waiting on Midwinter to get this final pack of mobs down. You can see them already moving towards the portal so that they can click on it the second they're out of combat, the second they're ready to go.
And there we are. Now portaled into this area, already killing a bunch of the trash mobs right at the entrance there, and just moving on as quickly as they possibly can.
Yeah, I think Meth is pretty much maybe caught up at this point. They seem like they're pretty much neck and neck. Also fighting the exact same mobs in the exact same place. So you have the everyone's favorite frontal deflection shield. So the next boss that's coming up that we're going to see are the twin Ogron, Paul and Phemos. A little bit of a nod to the original name of the Cyclops from the Odyssey. But so the Ogron are just larger, fiercer versions of ogres to some extent. They're kind of halfway between an ogre and a Gron in the, genetic lineage of Draenor.
A bit more savage.
Indeed. More savage, much larger, single eye. And so these are twin brothers. One of them, I think Phemos, wields 2 swords. Paul has a shield. And they have a pretty unique mechanic, actually, that kind of determines how you approach the fight as a whole. You see them there standing behind the arcane barrier on Midwinter's screen. The farther they are apart from each other, the angrier they get. And that anger manifests itself in the form of increased attack speed, faster casting speed, and in general, their abilities become much more lethal and hard to dodge. At the same time, they have abilities that contrast in the sense of wanting you to spread them apart. You know, one whirlwinds, the other puts down a lot of area denial. And so while you might want to keep them together, that will get you into trouble a lot of the time when their abilities sync up in various ways. So this is a really important tanking counter. The tanks have to be very adept at controlling the positioning of the mobs. And I think for a speedrun, one thing that's going to be interesting is how often they choose to keep the two mobs stacked on top of each other. It's not the safest thing to do most of the time, but obviously you're going to get better cleave DPS by doing that.
And it looks like Method has actually made a great time through that trash, and they're actually the first to pull Paul and Fimos here, the twin Ogron.
See it jumping right into it with Bloodlust on the pole.
Yeah, and they are stacking them directly on top of each other. Like Ian was saying, will get very, very risky as time goes on, but we'll have to see if that risk pays off for him.
Now you see those slow-moving flame walls. Fimos will like hurl his sword at a location. It buries itself in the ground and then just emits these waves of fire.
Watch out! This gonna hurt!
It's like Method now actually is going to split them up a little bit.
Yeah.
There's that giant AoE. You do not want anybody standing in that. That will hurt quite a bit. So it gives them a little bit of time to keep doing some melee DPS onto Paul. And then they're going to bring Fimos right back over and start beating on him.
Yep, so yeah, Method's got the 75%. And how is Midwinter doing?
Midwinter has just now engaged the twin Ogron.
So Method seems like they're about, 30, 45 seconds ahead at this point.
Yeah.
But as we all know, a single wipe changes everything. And with Trash in the mix, there's actually room to shave time in different ways that we couldn't see when it's just pure boss after boss after boss.
Yeah, for sure. We've already seen Midwinter had a pretty commanding lead at the start of this. Method was just able to get through the trash faster. They now have Paul and Fimos, the twin Ogron, at 62%. Midwinter doing their best to catch back up, 86% on their side. So definitely, I feel like they've really started to push some extra DPS on Midwinter's side. They may be able to make it back up. They did have much stronger boss DPS on the first boss, on Kargath. So they have a chance here, actually, to turn this back around again.
Yeah, so you'll see it looks like their strategy really is to keep them together as much as possible, except when Fimos whirlwinds, that's just going to be lethal, not something you can heal through. So separation becomes important.
Yeah, it gives you a lot more time to continue DPS. They do, as you can see, have a shared health pool. So DPS on one is just as good as DPS on the other. Obviously, DPS on both is even better, though.
All right, so yeah, it seems like about the 25% health gap is kind of holding steady. Method getting them just under 50%, as Midwinter is in the low 70s. See, so one of the quirks here is that they generate energy, so their ability usage is governed by their energy. It's something that we do a lot to kind of reduce reliance or importance of boss mods. Like obviously we know you could use DBM or Bigwigs or something to track the timers, but here they use their abilities reliably the same way something like Shao Pride did at 33, 66, and 100 energy. So you can kind of predict what's coming next and when. However, they have different rates of energy generation. So over the course of the fight, those ability usages are going to kind of shift, and things will start to line up in different ways. So it's an interesting way of having just a handful of basic abilities that create a lot of different situations for you to deal with over the course of the multi-minute encounter because the combinations evolve.
All right, so Midwinter now having the Twin Ogron at 54%, about to cross that 50% threshold. However, Method in a commanding lead, almost half the HP left, 25%, under half the HP left, excuse me, 24% now, 23% for Method. So Method really, really hanging on to their lead here, doing a great job of it.
Though definitely seeing some health bars dropping as those flame walls go out, but healer's able to react and top people back off.
This gonna be good.
It's actually, I mean, that 25% gap has just remained through this entire encounter. Like, literally,
Yeah.
these two guilds are doing the exact same DPS to the bosses. And so it's interesting how it was pretty much that trash clear that swung things, because their sustained boss DPS is almost identical.
Yeah.
Watch out.
All right. Twin Ogron for Method now at 4%. Looking like we're going to see these guys come down here very, very shortly. 3%. Raid is in great shape. There's a big AoE that goes out, but it doesn't matter. Healers are all over at 1% on the Twin Ogron, and down they go!
All right, so yes, the Method definitely scores the second boss kill. As expected, Midwinter has them at 25%. So we'll see how much time that buys Method as they continue to clear. So the next boss coming up as players continue to ascend to the heights of the Emperor's Spire is definitely an interesting one with some unique mechanics. So ogres, the ogres of Nagrand, they are very interested in relics and hunting ancient artifacts, and they're much more magical, they're much more intelligent, though still in a brute way, than the ogres you might be used to in Azeroth. And so a lot of the power that they've consolidated revolves around these artifacts of mysterious origin, maybe Titan origin, who knows. And one of them is this rune that was discovered to have very powerful anti-magic properties. It allows those who are exposed to it, after, though inflicting great pain to them, to become nearly impervious to magic. And so what you have next is Korag. And Korag, you're seeing here some of his minions. These are breakers of magic. So there are breakers who are incredibly resistant, if not immune, to individual schools of magic and can absorb them.
Midwinter has just killed the Twin Ogron themselves. On their way, they've got a lot of work to do if they want to catch back up, but I think they can do it. What do you guys think? Method, however, definitely very, very strongly in the lead. It's going to be very difficult for Midwinter to catch back up. You think Method's got this?
We'll see. All it takes is one wipe, as we know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these individual ogres are immune or highly resistant to individual schools of magic, but the next boss coming up, Korag, is actually a breaker of all magic. And so when you attack him, he actually absorbs 100% of magical damage from all your casters, from even rogue poisons, Death Knight attacks, Ret Paladin holy damage, all of that. So you might think, well, we'll just bring a bunch of warriors. Why would you bring casters to that fight? But actually, it's not immunity, it's a large absorption shield that he has. And so by depleting that shield, you can force him into a mode where he has to recharge. And that has important aspects, as we'll get to in a moment. So you end up wanting to bring a balanced raid encounter, and all types of damage are helpful in different ways.
And so Method has already pulled Korag, got him at 96%, 95% now. Obviously doing very, very well for themselves in this little race we've got going on here. Midwinter's still working their way through the trash. We're gonna have to see if they can make some magic happen here,
so to speak. So the main thing with Korag is, as he absorbs damage, there comes a time where he becomes vulnerable and has to recharge beneath this Titan relic at the center of the room. And when that happens, players can also stand on the relic. We see this beginning to happen right now on Method's screen, in fact. So he's recharging for 20 seconds, add spawn that need to be dealt with and controlled during this time, and you can pick one player or two on Mythic to go and stand in this beam. And you suffer excruciating damage while standing in it. Your healers are going to have to really focus healing intently on that person. But that person will come out of it with something like a 15 million point absorption effect for all magical damage.
Oh, we have a tank down for Method. Sko has fallen, does get that battle res immediately, coming right back up. Looks like they were able to recover from that pretty well. Roger Brown has fallen as well. This could be trouble. Lots of people very, very low here for Method, doing their best to recover though. It looks like they looks like they've stabilized.
So one interesting thing, you notice Roger Brown is still dead. If this were a 25-player raid in 5-4, if this were Siege of Orgrimmar, we would have seen 2-3 battle reses go out immediately. But this is using our new battle res system, where the battle reses accumulate over time, proportional to raid size and proportional to fight length. So if you make multiple mistakes early on in an encounter, it might be a bit harder to recover. On the flip side, when you have a really long fight like Garrosh or Shah of Fear or something, you might actually end up with far more battle reses than you used to. So you see those orbs that are falling and hitting the ground, like that one that just actually did hit the ground. Those orbs do a tremendous amount of damage to the raid as a whole, but if a single player stands under them, it will do the damage to the player instead. Now that damage is lethal for almost anyone, except if you have the magic buff that absorbs millions of damage, you can soak those. And over time, more and more of those magical spheres are going to be generated and fall. They're kind of loose remnants of energy coming out of this artifact. And so there's this ramping effect as the fight goes on. More people get empowered, more coordination is required to keep everything in the air and keep it from hitting the ground and damaging the raid.